ggplot is already a fantastic tool on its own, but it gets even better when you use one of the many extensions out there. And in today's video, I'll show you some of my favorite packages that will enhance your charts immediately. So let's dive in. Now the first package that I want to talk about is the patchwork package. It makes it super easy to combine plots. With the patchwork package, all you need is one plot and another plot, and then you can add them together to put them side by side. So that's super easy, or you could divide them to stack them on top of each other. Technically, there's also a third operator, namely this vertical bar here. This one definitely puts things next to each other. The plus just tries to decide what's the best option, but in most cases it will put things next to each other. The patchwork package can do a whole lot more. You can have really complicated layouts, and for more information on that you should check out the video on patchwork I have created a couple of months ago. Next up is the marquee package. Marquee, something like this, in any case this package here. This package makes it super easy to customize all of the text that you see inside of your ggplot. And gmarquee works just like gmtext. So basically you could have some text that you could throw into a data set that you then pass to ggplot, and then you'd normally throw a gmtext layer on top of that, but now you're using gmarquee, where you're using the label aesthetic to set the label to your text. And then if we get rid of all the other extras in a ggplot, then we see now that this was actually rendered as markdown. As you can see, I have used these asterisks here and these underlined tags to, well, use markdown. So with marquee, it's really easy to customize single parts of your text. Case in point, you can even wrap things into curly brackets and then in there use classes like .red, and that way, if you re-execute this, the bold part also became red now. And if you wanted to, you could even use markdown notation to throw in SVG files. So if you render this, then you see now that we also have the R logo in there. All of this is pretty cool, and marquee has way more customization options. If you want to learn how that works, check out this video that I created on marquee for this specific purpose. The next package will give your chart superpower. And with superpowers, I mean interactivity. With the ggiraph package, it's really easy to turn any ggplot interactive. This means that you can have hover animations or on-click events or tooltips. And the recipe to make any plot interactive is really easy. With the ggiraph package, you could just take any plot that you currently have and then decide that you want to make the points interactive. So you change that layer into an interactive layer, and there you then have to use an interactive aesthetic like the tooltip aesthetic and map it to something. And then all you have to do is to save it in a variable and stick that variable into the ggiraph function to render it as an actual interactive chart. And now if I hover over this, you see that I do get labels. Of course, there's lots of customization and interactivity that you can bring into this, but I think the idea is clear. If you want to have all the details on how to do all the custom styling stuff, then check out this video here. A super neat option, especially for line charts, is to use direct labels inside of your plot. This means that instead of a legend, you have the labels for your lines inside of the line chart immediately. And with the gmtext package, you can place text anywhere you like, and they even wrap around curved surfaces. Gtextpath is wild. Check out this example from the documentation. You can make text spin around in circles. You might not want to use this exact kind of style inside of your plot, but the idea is always the same. If you have a data set with some x and y coordinates, then you could pass it to ggplot to create a line just like you normally would, and then you could add a gmtext line layer on top of that to create a label, set the size for your label, and then if you were to execute this, you'd see that now you immediately have a text that is on the line. And to position it differently, you can use the hjust value to position it along the line and the vjust value to position it on top of the line. And here we've used the gmtext line layer, but there are a whole lot of other gmtext layers inside of this package. Basically, for all kinds of layers, you have a corresponding gmtext layer. For gmline, there was gmtext line. For gmpath, there's gmtext path, and you get the idea. I like to use gmtext path in particular in line charts to label the lines directly, which makes for a really nice looking and informative chart. If you're looking to learn how to create this particular chart, I've created a video for this, which you can find up by the link that should pop up right about now. Ever wanted to use an image or a cool pattern inside of your ggplots? With the ggpattern package, this is really easy to do. Here I'll show you how to use it to use a gradient below line charts. Here I've created a simple line chart using data from the S&P 500 opening prices. We could make this into an area chart by using ggarea instead of gmline. Of course, then we might use the fill aesthetic instead of the color aesthetic. And to make this into a cool looking gradient filling, we can use ggpattern. There we can use the color aesthetic once again to have an outline of our area instead. And then we have to choose a pattern, which in this case is gradient. And then we can choose the two gradient colors, blue and white. And now if we execute this, we see that we have a nice line chart with a slick looking gradient below that. That makes for a pretty cool visual if you ever need it. Now the ggBump package is not a package that I use often, but when I do, it makes for a really cool visual. With this package, you can create nice looking charts that show rankings over time quite smoothly. Here I have some fake data about rankings of different countries. All of that is randomly generated. And if you wanted to show rankings over time, you could just take this data set, pass it to ggplot, where you use the year column as the x-axis, the rank as the y-axis, and for the color you use the country name, and then you just create a gmline. And usually in these kind of situations, you want to have the y-axis reversed so that number one is on top, and that way you'd get a chart that shows how the ranks change, but it doesn't look particularly nice. What looks nice though is that if you use instead of gmline, you use ggbump from ggBump, then everything looks much smoother and cleaner. And here's a small add-on for our chart. With the gghighlight package, you can immediately highlight a specific part of your chart. With bump charts, I like to think that it's a particularly cool visual. You could use the gghighlight package to highlight a specific thing that you define via filter commands as you do in the pliers filter function. So here I want to highlight Germany, and I don't need any extra labels because I currently don't have that. And if I try to execute this, it will tell me that I don't have gghighlight installed. So let's fix that. And after I have fixed this mistake, you can see here now that one particular country is highlighted. And if you ever want to visualize uncertainties or distributions, then there's no way around the ggdist package. It has a whole lot of customized or specialized tools for showing these kinds of things visually. Most notably, I like to use it for creating rain cloud plots. To create a nice looking rain cloud plot, you just take your data set and pass it to ggplot, where for the x-axis you use the variable that you want to establish the uncertainty for, and then for the fill and the y-aesthetic you use the same variable, and then you just throw in a stat half eye on top of that. And that way you immediately get almost all of the parts for the rain cloud plot. Here we could also change the height so that the half eyes become a little bit narrower, and then I can also throw in a theme to make things look even better. And then if I want to have the rain part of the rain cloud plot, then you just throw in a GM point layer where for the shape you use a specific symbol, and then you'd get your points below the rain cloud. If you want to have more details about the rain cloud plot, or you even want to have a dot histogram below that, I'll show you how all of that works in a separate video. Feel free to check out the video after this. Alright, this last package is super cool. Right now it is still in an experimental status, but it already shows so much promise. With the legendry package, it's super easy to create customized legends where you have some histograms or violent plots inside of your legends instead of a regular legend. And it has much more features that are similar to this to make your legends or axes much more detailed. Here, let me just show you the official documentations because I am not 100% sure how long the syntax will stay as it is. Possibly, since this is an experimental package, the syntax might change. So when in doubt, you should refer to the official documentation to see what's the newest version. In any case, we can see here in this cool plot that we have in the legend, we have a violent plot as well as a histogram. And all of this works by inside of the scale layer for the corresponding aesthetic, you just have to set the guy to a so-called gizmo. With gizmo density, you will get a density violent plot like this, and with gizmo histogram, you'll get a histogram plot like this. Pretty cool and pretty easy as well. Similarly, if you ever created a bubble chart, then you know how annoying the legend is in that case. With this new legendary package, you can now use the guide circles function that will nest the circles within one another to create this cool looking legend. All you have to do is to take your regular plot and add a guides layer on top of that, where you use the guide circles layer. There are also some other variations variations of this, feel free to check out the documentation. And finally, one more thing that I also think is really cool is that you can group together specific parts of your axes. For example, here we see in this chart unemployment rates for different presidencies. Technically, this is just a plot where on the x-axis you have the year, on the y-axis you have the unemployment, and that's it. But here you can take the plot and change the guides so that you can group together specific parts of your x-axis according to who was president at that time. All you have to do for that is to use the guides layer once again, where you use guide axis nested, where you specify specific keys. And these keys you can specify via the key range map. And inside this key range map, you can specify a data set. In this case, it is called presidential, that should have columns start and end name that you can map to the corresponding arguments inside of the key range map function. And then via the level and color argument, you can decide on which level the specific label is supposed to be. So here we have 4 levels, but depending on your use case, you might only want to use 2. So all of this is pretty cool, and the legendry package has a few more tricks up its sleeve. Feel free to check out the documentation. These were some of my favorite ggplot extensions. Let me know in the comments if you've used these extensions before or if you want to try out one of them next. If you're looking to see more ggplot videos, you might like to check out this playlist here. And now with all of that said, I say thank you for watching and I will see you next time.